Hi, and welcome to the Hofline, your online hotline direct line to the women-only attorneys at Hofheimer Family Law. My name is Katie Carter, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm an attorney with Hofheimer Family Law, a Virginia-based family law firm that represents women exclusively in divorce, custody, and support cases. And I'm here today with Leah Hadley, and I'm going to read all of this really carefully to make sure I get it exactly right because it's really impressive. She is the founder and senior financial planner for the Great Lakes Divorce Financial Solutions and Great Lakes Investment Management, and she's also a financial coach for the MomShine Collective, a program for women in high conflict divorces. She is a sought after speaker on the financial mistakes that women make in divorce and on how to help women escape financially abusive situations. So I'm really excited to have you here, Leah. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me. I know you've got a ton of expertise, and I just can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Katie.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think you're really going to have a lot of insight to help, a lot of our clients, prospective clients, because financial abuse is just so rampant and so insidious. It's one of those things that kind of sneaks up on you and affects every facet of your life. And I get questions all the time from women just desperate to escape these abusive situations. So I'll just jump right in. If you could tell us, what do you think are the biggest financial mistakes women make in divorce?
Yeah, there really are a lot, unfortunately. And so I think the biggest and most important thing is to really educate yourself about your finances, to really have a very, very clear understanding of not just, if we look at a balance sheet, what is everything worth today, but what does this actually mean for me, not just today, but going forward. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is really very short term focus. So looking at what are my needs, my immediate needs right now, and what am I comfortable or uncomfortable with right now. And so a lot of times with that short-term focus, people can really make the moving forward and moving on very difficult on themselves. So for example, one of the things that comes up most commonly is just really wanting to stay in the marital home. That's a big one for a lot of people. And I completely understand it. You're going through a huge life transition. You really want to move on top of it. I get it. Went through my own divorce and I did keep the marital home. I had 3 young children at the time. So I really do understand absolutely the emotional attachment and just sort of the lifestyle. However, with that being said, a lot of times people give up significant other assets in order to stay in the marital home. For example, retirement accounts. So they're really focused on what the need is in the present moment or what the concern is in the present moment, but maybe not necessarily thinking down the road to retirement. Well, unfortunately, a lot of times people find that they can't afford the home that they are really, really wanting to stay in from a cash flow perspective. And so they're giving up other assets that have a long-term implication, plus couple that with the challenges of maintaining a home that was previously maintained, sometimes by 2 incomes going down to 1 income, right? Or sometimes by somebody, most families, if they are going through a divorce, the income is not changing, but the expenses are going up because there's an additional household that needs to be funded. So a lot of times retaining that marital home can be a huge financial burden,
Yeah.
especially with the current market environment that we're in. So many people had a relatively low interest rate on their mortgage. And now if they have to refinance to get the other person's name off of the home or to cash out their equity in the home, then a lot of times they're refinancing at a significantly higher interest rate. Plus, a lot of property values have increased significantly, and their property taxes are often going up when they're getting the appraisal associated with the refinancing, right? And so there are all these different factors that can have a really negative impact from a cash flow perspective for somebody who really wants to stay in that marital home. Now, again, it's not everybody, but really understanding the implications of that is important. The
Yeah.
other big financial mistake that I see people making is not understanding a pension. If there's a pension involved in the marital estate, not understanding all the options, not understanding the value of the pension, and not understanding all of the different pieces of it that need to get negotiated if you are dividing it in some way. And a lot of times, we talk about the marital home a lot of times that's the biggest asset. But if there is a pension, oftentimes the pension is the biggest asset of the marital estate.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. I see a lot of those mistakes. So move it like the next logical step. If you've got someone in your office who's like, oh my God, that's me. Like I want to keep the house. I don't know if I can. I don't understand any of this retirement. What steps should these women take to try and kind of like not make those mistakes?
Yeah, it does start with that initial just looking at the overall financial picture and getting really clear on what does the marital estate look like? What are the assets? Within the assets, which are liquid, which are illiquid, right? What's the cost basis or any tax consequences associated with liquidating assets? What are the liabilities? Whose name this is like, there's often a lot of confusion around like whose name is actually on something, particularly when it comes to things like credit card debt and stuff like that. And so getting super clear on what are we even talking about before we start to think about like, can I afford to stay in the house? Like, let's just look at what is the overall picture, right?
Mhm.
And I always talk to people about what's really important to them. For a lot of people, financial security is really important to them, feeling financially stable. Well, the things that allow somebody to feel financial secure, that stability, is having access to liquid assets, having access to cash or something that can easily be turned into cash, right? And that gives you freedom and flexibility to know that you're able to pay for things when something comes up. When people end up with a lot of debt coming out of a marriage, that can have a significant impact on cash flow. And so we really want to look at all of those different factors and determining what is in your best interest, because what is in your best interest might not actually be the first thing that comes to mind when you start to think about what you do or don't want from a financial perspective.
Yeah, I think there's just so many emotions going into it too, right? And I think a lot of people, I mean, a lot of the women that I've talked to, I don't know if this is your experience too, but they are embarrassed about what is there and what isn't there, especially if they, like you mentioned, if they have a lot of debt involved. Uh, so I would just say that it's especially important at this stage if you're worried about these mistakes to work with someone, whether it's a financial planner or a divorce lawyer or whoever that you're comfortable with. Make sure it's someone that you can have difficult conversations about money with. This is not a time to be the ostrich who buries her head in the sand and says, like I can't think about that debt right now. We've got to think about the debt. We've got to break it down. We've got to be able to come up with a realistic picture of what your life is going to look like after divorce. And that comes from sharing that information with someone who can give you advice and coming up with a realistic solution that can help move you forward in a way where you feel that financial security piece. Like a lot of it comes and it's a joint effort between the client and the professional, and being able to be honest and being able to be flexible and come up with solutions that will work. So I would just suggest also being open-minded, and I think that's what you're saying too, Leah, about the house. Is like the house is great and I understand wanting to stay, but it's only a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. And you don't want to take on more than you can manage, especially at a time that is already challenging. Maybe you can keep the home, maybe you can't, but it's definitely worth being open-minded and having a realistic discussion about what money's going to be coming in, what money's going to be going out. And of course, like I mean, like if you're a homeowner, it's not just a question of a mortgage. There's taxes, insurance, there's upkeep. It's not, I'm not even talking about that, bathroom from the 1970s that's got to be fixed. I'm talking about like, is the roof going to cave in? Like,
Right.
do you need a new HVAC system because it's not working? Big money things can happen with a house. So it's important to factor in some of the maintenance and upkeep to the house, as well as the things that maybe you weren't doing before, like mowing the lawn. Are you going to hire someone? Are you going to do it yourself? Obviously you're perfectly capable, but it may be something that someone else was taking care of prior to this point, and now you need to consider how is that all going to get done, and how is that going to impact the budget, and are all of these things that you can afford, like taken as a total picture of your post-divorce finances. So definitely a good idea to talk to someone, and someone that you can be honest with.
Absolutely. And Katie, there's an exercise I really like to do with clients who are on the fence with the house and they're trying to figure out if it's something that they can afford or not. And that is to have them consider two other living situations, whether that is
Ooh,
selling the house and taking the funds and reinvesting it into some other home, or renting, or whatever the two scenarios are. That's really up to the client, but really getting into the weeds of what of each of those financial scenarios look
yeah,
like. Retaining the home, looking at what you give up, what the costs are associated with retaining it, all that full picture. So not just, the asset value or the debt, but also the overall cash flow. But
yeah.
then looking at the other scenarios as well. And I remember doing this with a woman not that long ago, and she was like really not wanting to rent. She was looking at a townhome. And when we ran the numbers, she was going to have an extra $1,000 a month in cash flow. And for a single mom with kids, that's a big deal, to know that, okay, I'm going to be able to put savings away. I'm going to be able to put
Hmm.
retirement money away. And knowing that, and really that she valued financial security, that ended up being a much better option for her.
Yeah, well, and I think it takes the scariness away from it too, right? It's not just, oh my God, like giving up my house and all my memories and my comfort and like this is my home, my space. But looking at the other options, I really love that idea. It makes it like, oh, like these are the things that I'm getting. Like
Right.
this is how it's going to feel, and that's something that I value maybe even more than the security that I feel in the home that I'm currently living in. And
Right.
that leads me perfectly into my next question. I mean, it may be the answer that you were going to give for this next question, but which is if you were going to give words of wisdom to a woman who is about to go through a divorce or currently going through one, what would your little pearls of wisdom be?
Well, I think give yourself some grace. I mean, I really do work with a
Yes.
lot of people who are coming out of financially abusive situations, and they are learning the finances while they are going through a divorce. A divorce is a stressful time in the best of circumstances.
Hmm.
And so when you are also trying to learn about your own financial situation at that time, trying to get an understanding of money, and I love what you said, Katie, just being open and honest. For some people, these are the first conversations they're having about money with a professional. Like, this is oftentimes not necessarily something that they have been actively involved with. And so there's a lot of firsts and a lot of discomfort. And so give yourself some grace. People are so hard on themselves, especially with
Hmm.
any lack of knowledge around money or feeling like they're financially illiterate. I always encourage people to write down everything they do know, because a lot of times they know a lot more than they think they
Yeah.
do. But then to also write down all of their questions, and to identify specifically, who can I ask that to? Who can I ask that to increase my knowledge, to feel more confident in my understanding of things? And so the greater clarity you can have around what do I know and where are the holes, so that way you can start to fill those holes, you
Hmm.
can really start to get some clarity.
Yeah, yeah. And just don't be embarrassed. We've
Yeah,
seen it. We've seen it all
seen it
before.
all.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean, and things in a lot of way. I mean, when I first started practicing, we were like riding on in the end of that 2008 recession. So I saw a ton of debt and mortgages underwater and just some horrible, horrible things. And in general, I think I've seen fortunes improve in general since then. But I would just say, don't be embarrassed. We've seen it before. Ask the questions, get the answers. Like, no one's here to judge you, no matter what the situation is. And you should hire someone in general where you feel like you can be open and honest and where it's not as embarrassing. Because, I mean, the only thing that would be embarrassing to me personally is not knowing enough to put you in the best position possible on the day that that final divorce decree is entered and you're able to move on with that post divorce happily ever after. Like, you should be in the strongest position possible, and that's a joint effort. So I think that's what I would say is just that honesty and that lack of embarrassment is pretty critical.
Absolutely.
I have one, I was going to ask you too, Leah, about your practice area. I know everything is, Great Lakes, which does not make me think of, of Virginia, which is where our law firm is based, but you're obviously such an expert. You're at the top of your field. You told me too that you work with clients in Virginia too, right? And
Absolutely.
how would we, use you if somebody was, interested in working with you through their divorce?
Yes, so we do work with clients nationwide, but in particular, we've done lots and lots of cases in Virginia. And, we work over Zoom for most people. That works well. It's actually nice because when we're running reports, we can kind of share charts and projections and all of that. Very clearly, it's easy to see over Zoom. And we work with everybody from those who are just thinking about divorce and trying to understand the financials and trying to see, what does my life look like post-divorce from a financial perspective, to those who are in the thick of it, who need more in-depth financial analysis to determine what is marital property, what might be considered separate, looking at some of those nuances, to those who are post-divorce and are looking to settle assets and, have a real plan going forward so they can feel very confident in their financial future. So we work with everybody, through every phase of the divorce process, and we're a resource, whether you're in Virginia or somewhere else.
Thank you. Good. It's always so good to hear. I mean, not all of my clients, of course, work with a financial planner, but I always recommend it. And I know they would feel so much more confident if they did. And I mean, just listening to you talk, I feel like it's really confidence boosting. All of these things make a lot of sense. Get the information, go into it with full knowledge, have these conversations so that you don't strike out on the day after your divorce is finalized and be like, what is this actually going to feel like? You should have those
Yeah,
answers before. You should go
right.
in with as much knowledge as possible so that at the end of the day you feel like that you'll be okay. You and your kids will be okay, and that all the basic needs are met, whether that means you stay in the home or you move. And it's possible, depending on the circumstances, that you might waive part of the retirement in exchange for something else. But if you were going to do that, then you need to have a really big conversation about what that's going to look like today and what's that going to look like down the road. Are you going to be able to make that back? Are you going back to work? Are you staying home? What are your plans, and how is that going to look short term, long term, and every term in between? Because your financial wellness matters, and it's one of the biggest predictors of 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 mental well-being, of financial well-being for the long term. So
Right.
it's the stakes are high here, and it's easy both to get on the right track and ask the right questions to the right person, and it's easy also to not do it and wish you had. So I would say, if you are struggling at all, if you have questions at all, talk to an attorney, talk to a financial planner, maybe even Leah. I'll leave her contact information at the end of this podcast so that you can reach her if you want to reach out and work with her. But definitely get that information. And is there anything else you wanted to add, Leah? I mean,
Just
this is
that I think
comprehensive.
you've made such important points, Katie, about being open and honest with the professionals that you're working with, but also just being open and honest with yourself. You're at a moment in time in your life that is difficult and it's challenging, and that is normal. So why not make it as easy on yourself as possible and get the right support in place that
Yeah.
can really facilitate making that happen?
Yeah, it's going to make you feel so much better just to feel
Absolutely.
prepared for what the future might bring. And none of us have crystal balls, but we can do a pretty good job of setting people up for success in the future. Anyway, thank you again so much, Leah, for joining me to talk about such a challenging topic. I know it's important to anyone watching, that to get that we really do understand how you're feeling and how you got here. And we're not looking to judge. We're just trying to help make sure that you have the tools that you need to move forward. I definitely always recommend a consultation with an attorney, or meeting with a financial advisor, just to get an idea of what your rights and entitlements are in Virginia or in the state where you live, if you don't currently live in Virginia. But don't make any big decisions without talking to people who can give you accurate, up-to-date advice that's specific to the state that you live in. Um, and then move on from there in full knowledge that the decisions that you're making are good ones that are going to keep you and your kids safe, now and in the future. Also, feel free to check out our website at hoflaw.com and check out our books, our free reports, and tons of articles on all sorts of topics. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Leah, too, for joining us. I think this was really helpful.
Thank you.